Welcome to Bicycle Retail Radio, presented by the National Bicycle Dealers Association. Bicycle Retail Radio brings together retailers, vendors, advocates, and thought leaders for honest discussions about the latest issues facing bicycle retailers. The podcast dives deep into the challenges and triumphs of the bicycle industry, providing an in-depth look at the person behind the profession. Aiming to deliver content that's both relatable and thought-provoking, offering real-world tips and insights to help you find success in the bicycle industry. There's a human side of the business, and the podcast aims to share stories, experiences, and strategies that you can apply in your own shop. Whether you're looking for inspiration, practical advice, or a sense of community, you've come to the right place. The National Bicycle Dealer Association has a rich history of supporting retailers across the nation. Founded in 1946 with a mission to strengthen specialty bicycle retailers through education, through research, through communication, and through advocacy. The National Bicycle Dealer Association is proudly supported by our members and our membership. If you'd like to learn more about the benefits of joining, please visit nbda.com.
Attention, bicycle retailers. The NBDA Retailer Summit is coming to Las Vegas, March 25th. Join over 150 of the industry's top retailers at Retailer Summit West, an exclusive one-day event featuring powerful insights, hands-on workshops, and unbeatable networking opportunities. Spend the day with top experts in our industry. Don't miss this chance to elevate your business. Learn more and register at nbda.com.
All right, welcome to Bicycle Retail Radio. This is NBDA President Heather Mason. This is our NBDA News Hour, co-hosted with our friends from Human Powered Solutions. Today, I'm joined by micromobility experts, Mr. Jay Townley, Fred Clements, and Mike Fritz. Welcome, guys.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Listeners, the team at Human Powered Solutions has over 245 years of experience, considered the data wizards. Their monthly newsletter, the Micromobility Reporter, is a dynamic resource for the industry. Inside the reporter, you'll find timely news and in-depth analysis about the latest in human-powered transportation, including bicycles, e-bicycles, e-scooters, and rideshare. Always included is a focus on supply chain issues, technology, and both business and consumer trends that are driving the marketplace. Our monthly news feature focuses on the articles contained within this report, giving a more in-depth view and, let's say, first-hand seat with the experts. I highly suggest you sign up to receive the email version of this. You can go visit humanpoweredsolutions.com, and it's really easy to sign up. With that, lots to get into today. The recent newsletter is titled Tech Comes to Roads, a mixed picture on jobs and new import rules. The reporter is absolutely full of great articles this month featuring safer commuting, research like the NBDA's cost of doing business study, brands like Go Cycle crowdfunding, and Dick's reporting that earnings are up. There's a lot there. I mean, it's up and down. So Jay, I want to start just by asking you, current state of the bicycle industry overall. How do you feel we're doing? It's November 2024. What are your thoughts from where you sit?
Well, you and I have talked about this at some length, and I've talked to Fred and to Mike about this, but I think at this point, it's only fair and honest, quite frankly, to let the dealers know that the industry is not in that great a shape worldwide. I'm taking the basic stand after looking at the data and the details that the old system is broken. And we've yet to figure out what the new, if there is a system, let's say new systems are going to be, the way the future will be crafted and configured. One of the things that I think is hurting, and I've gotten this also in talking to Mark Anderman in Europe, is disinformation. And I'm sad to say that. Some of it's purposeful, some of it isn't. Most of it is not. Most of it is simply folks not understanding that what they are saying is not helping understand what the detail is. And I think one of the issues that keeps coming up in reporting of industry data is dollars and revenue are used more than units, to the point where units are pushed aside. I've said for a number of years, I think that's an error. And so we can start out answering your question by stating that the latest data shows that unit sales are down 40% compared to the pre-pandemic levels, which are the important comparison to make. Not last month, not last year, but 40% down in units for the whole of the bike industry in the US compared to the pre-pandemic levels. Now, the other issue here is that the Section 301 tariffs, which tend to get overlooked, are now applying to all bikes and e-bikes from China. And Heather, you and I just went back and forth with the numbers. So I think it's also fair to mention this, because I'll touch on this too, that we're selling everything at a discount today. But understand that what's in effect right now from a tariff standpoint is e-bikes coming in from China and bicycles coming in from China. Why is that important? Well, again, if you look at the data, 87% of all bikes and e-bikes that came into the US year to date originated in China. So they're subject to these punitive tariffs and to the standard tariffs, and that's the key. The punitive tariffs of 35% are also applied on top of the normal or regular standard or regular tariffs. So from China, e-bikes were zero regular tariff. They're now 35%. A combination of all other bicycles. You've got some bikes coming in and have come in for decades at 11%, others at 5.5%. So add 35 to that, and you end up with 46% and 40.5. And that takes care of all bikes. So you've got e-bikes at 35. They're the lowest. Regular bicycles between the 40.5 and 46%. From all other countries that we import bicycles from, the standard tariffs are in effect. E-bikes are zero. Regular bikes are 11 to 5.5%. But when you look at the fact that we've had everything on discount and on sales for over a year, we're going on the second year of this occurring. That, as you have found out, Heather, in talking to P2 groups, you and I hearken back to pre-COVID and the beginning of the COVID, and e-bikes were in the $14,000 to $15,000 range in the specialty retail channel. Right now, the specialty brands have come out with $5,000 e-bikes, and they're too expensive, because what's selling in the specialty channel are $2,000 to $3,000 e-bikes. And on top of that, you got what's happening in D2C. So I think in summary, and answering your question here, is we've got to be prepared for when prices go back to normal, when these tariffs are going to work through the system. And keep in mind, there's a huge misconception that goes back years to the point that, well, tariffs are paid for by the Chinese. That is not true. Tariffs are paid by the importer of record when those products come through the port. In fact, they're due 1 week to 10 days after they clear the port of entry, which means there's also a financial burden on the importers of record, who are the brands. The importers are the brands. Now, D2C throws a monkey wrench in this, in that D2C is direct to consumer. But if you're not coming in using the de minimis rule, which is a whole different story we've talked about and have to discuss going forward, the brands that we are most interested in bike shops and what's happening in the mass merchant, and also we'll be talking about Dick's Sporting Goods, so about the full line sporting goods, are paying these kind of duties, and we'll have to be in a position where we have to put prices out on the sales floor going forward that are going to reflect the brands getting these duties back, as long as we're so deeply committed to China as a source of product. So with that, all of that said, I think that bike shops really need to change. We got to change the business. Excuse me. We got to change the business model. And again, we've talked about this, Heather. It's changing their whole view so that bike shops understand that they've got to become independent of brands. Sad to say that, but I think that's a simple fact of life. Like it or not, the bicycle shop is the brand. It's the most important brand, and they've got to operate independently from the bicycle brands and the product brands, really working with those brands that want to help them, that are going to be true partners going forward. Bicycle dealers need to focus on a different kind of business model with rentals and leasing, and also making themselves transportation centers. so that they are looking at every bit of the micromobility world that they can, in addition to the traditional markets that we have dealt with, the high-end market and the kids market. And we also have to focus on repair, where bicycle shops are exceptional. We give exceptional service in our channel of trade. In fact, we are the service centers along with mobile service. So therefore, we need to emphasize, excuse me, the whole repair aspect of our business and the importance of service to the consumer. And many of the brands, as you're well aware, are becoming attuned to that, where you've got D2C brands that are now working with bike shops because they want the setup capability and the service capability. So that's, I know, a long-winded response to your question, but also it could be a lot longer. But that, in summary, gives dealers what I think they need to do, and this channel of trade needs to do, to change according to what we see out there in the facts that are the business today.
Yeah, thank you, Jay. I mean, there's a lot there, from the inventory, discounting, the tariffs, the retailer being their own brand, communicating those services they offer, the why do business with them, removing those barriers, rentals, experiences we can offer. There's so much there, and all of that is following the same suit of the conversations I am having in the P2 programs. So it's kind of, I just came off of P2 program. You know, we can theorize about what's going to happen with the discounting, how long this current state of the industry is going to last. But there are things that we can actually, you know, take and tangible things that we as retailers can do right now. And that's, you know, focusing on your brand, focusing on the experience, training your staff, advocating for your brand when it comes to relationships with the brands that you choose to do business with. So we're just going to have to keep hanging in tight, watching those financials, keeping an eye on our cash flow. And I know that as strong retailers, we will get through this. But yeah, interesting state of times. And I appreciate, Jay, your summary on that. You know, Mike, I want to bring you into the conversation. Then before we get into the specific articles in the Micromobility Reporter, I just want also a general update from you when it comes to e-bike safety. I hate that I'm still seeing incidents reported in New York City. And then also I heard that there was a special invitation only event that happened down with the FDNY. Can you catch us up?
Yes, yeah, it's my favorite topic. Unfortunately, not for very good reasons, because it is a major crisis in our industry, and not only the micromobility industry, but electric transportation in general. And that's, you know, the hazards associated with lithium-ion batteries, and what transpires when a lithium-ion battery fails catastrophically. Yes. If you think you're frustrated, I'm incredibly frustrated. I mean, I have been on a soapbox for 3-4 years, trying to elevate awareness in the minds of our dealers relative to the hazards presented by this energy storage technology. And, you know, in the hopes that dealers will hear and react in an appropriate fashion, and take whatever steps are necessary to mitigate the hazards, and then to pass that knowledge along to our consumers. Yet I hear back from people that spend a lot of time at bicycle retailer. You know, they'll walk into a shop and report to me, yeah, I walked into XYZ bike shop in wherever, and what do I see but a sketchy looking D2C e-bike, you know, that probably retailed for $6.99 with its battery sitting on a wooden bench plugged into a charger. And it's kind of like, aren't you hearing? You know, at one point I thought, I've said this so many times, it's got to have gotten through, but that's apparently not the case. And we hear anecdotal evidence all along that this message has not permeated our industry as deeply as it needs to make sure. You know, you know, this is an issue with technology, and technology evolves. You know, somebody will invent a new concept or a new widget or whatever it is that does wonderful things, but there are downsides to it. And it needs refinement. It needs refinement to improve its efficiency, its functionality, its safety. And that's kind of where we are right now. And given the magnitude of this problem, the entire energy storage industry is so focused on this problem, and they're dedicating such resources to finding real technology-based solutions that will address these problems without the need to have user intervention to the degree that we have it right now. But it's a slow process. The way I see it, you know, there's a couple of tiers of solutions in the works. The first tier is the pure technology solution, and you have oftentimes heard me talk about solid-state batteries. Solid-state batteries, it sounds like a panacea. It eliminates the propensity of lithium-ion battery to fail catastrophically, but it's turning out to be an incredibly difficult technology to commercialize. Generally, there's a number of R&D companies working out there. They are funded by the huge automakers because clearly electric car makers have got a significant stake in this, and they're making progress. It's slow, much slower than we wish it to be, but it is moving along. There are breakthroughs in the solid electrolyte, which is the foundation. There's breakthroughs in anode and cathode technologies, all of which that ultimately will give us safe lithium-ion batteries and we don't have to worry about this stuff. But, you know, at one point, I was optimistic that we would see solid-state lithium-ion batteries commercialized in 2024. Well, you know, in certain pockets they are, but they're very expensive. They're rare. It's not gotten the widespread penetration into society that it needs to have, and it certainly hasn't hit micromobility, specifically e-bikes. So then there's another technology that can be in the shorter term horizon, and that's technologies that hinder cell-to-cell propagation. And we've talked about this ad nauseum. You know, a battery pack fails when a single cell in a 60 cell or a 78 cell or a 48 cell battery pack, you know, battery packs are made up of numerous individual cells. If one of those cells is defective or one of those cells is stressed and it fails, that failure is thermal runaway, and the thermal runaway by its very nature propagates cell to cell to cell to cell. So what starts as a one cell failure ends up being a 60 cell failure, and a 60 cell battery failure is significantly more dramatic than a single cell failure. So some really smart battery pack engineers are developing thermal barriers that will actually isolate and insulate a cell such that if a single cell fails, it hinders or it precludes cell to cell propagation. And as I say, a single cell failure is manageable. It's still problematic. It still generates heat and gas and whatnot, but it is not the catastrophe. It's not the conflagration that you get when the whole pack goes up. So we're making progress there. And the short-term solution, we've got a number of suppliers distributing battery packs that are potted. Potted simply means you fill the pack with a resin. You know, it's much like you pot a motor controller. And basically it makes it waterproof, and, you know, it insulates it from exterior factors. In our particular case, the initial objective was to make battery packs waterproof, because a lot of bikes are out for rental and they're used in beachfront properties, and if they get immersed in salt water, they'll blow up sooner or later. So this was to make battery packs resistant to saltwater penetration so that they're safe in that regard. But lo and behold, that resin also impedes cell-to-cell propagation, which is a good thing. And now companies are looking at like flexible barriers that they can build into the pack that does the same thing. So that's great. But that's out in the horizon. It's going to take a while to get implemented. So I keep coming back to the mantra that I give over and over and over again. Our best defense up until now is education. Mm-hmm. Helping people understand the hazards, helping people understand how to mitigate the hazards and preclude a failure in the first place. And there are solid methods and protocols that will do that. And we've published them, we've talked about them, but it appears though in some cases it's fallen on deaf ears because people are back doing the same old things, and bike shops are burning down and apartments are burning and people are dying. And now the interesting thing is, you know, again, the nature of this problem is such that now we've got the federal regulators getting involved. We all know that CPSC has been looking at this for a while. I mean, we testified in Bethesda, Maryland back in July of 22 or 23 about lithium-ion batteries as they're used in electric bicycles. So CPSC is definitely on it, and they've got a mandate to regulate lithium-ion batteries here in the near term. We work very closely with UL, so we know what they're doing in terms of writing the regulations. But now the EPA, the Environmental Protection Agency, is involved. I participated in a webinar a couple of weeks ago where EPA is looking at lithium batteries in general, all the way from the cell phone level to automobile level. We're in what they call the mid-format size lithium-ion batteries. So the EPA is studying this issue, and the EPA's got awesome regulatory authority that they can bring to bear. You referenced the seminar, the symposium that was just held in New York City, Tuesday and Wednesday of this week. That was sponsored by Homeland Security. Homeland Security has gotten involved, and Homeland Security has basically brought together the fire departments from major metropolitan areas that are the epicenters of the problems, because that's where the density and concentration of the population and the users are located. And they're talking about ways to ameliorate the whole situation. So there's a lot of focus, a lot of effort from the regulatory standpoint, but as we all know, governments work at the speed of a glacier, you know, and the technology is challenging. and people are working hard on it. And until there's that aha moment, which says, why didn't we think of that in the first place? We've got to be careful. We cannot get around the fact that a lithium-ion battery has the highest energy, the highest gravimetric energy density and the highest volumetric energy density, which means there is nothing else that we can put on an electric bicycle to give it the kind of performance that make electric bicycles practical. But it comes with a downside. We have to address and be sensitive to that downside and react accordingly. Enough said.
No, I mean, Mike, I love your passion for what you do, staying on top of this for the industry, which is so important. And yeah, knowing that the EPA is getting involved and Department of Homeland Security. I mean, we're continuing just to watch this unfold, and it's just more proof that we do as an industry have to do the right thing, have to move forward with just definitely a regard to how we keep e-bikes, e-mobility a thriving segment in our industry, and that's by being very safe and following the right protocols. So
we could spend the rest of this webinar and talk for an additional couple hours about recycling, because that's a big part of it. I mean, I've just touched on the safety issues, but there's a whole safety issue and logistics issue associated with recycling these battery packs, A, at the end of their life, and B, when a battery pack is compromised, rendering it dangerous for continued use. So it's a big issue, and we need to react accordingly.
Well, Mike, I appreciate your feedback here. Yeah, big questions, general state of the industry, general state of e-bike safety. I guess, Fred, we got to give you a big one. Let's get you into the conversation. I am sure that you have read the NBDA cost of doing business study that just came out. The reports in the study say that net profit earnings are down and inventory turns are dismal. The report, is based on feedback from over 100 retailers and really gives us a look about how retailers are doing right now, comparison single locations, multi-location shops, and where the shops are, like Metro City or a small town. I'm just wondering, Fred, your thoughts on the data within the report, and with that coupled with maybe advice you'd give for retailers right now when it comes to navigating this inventory cash flow margin situation. It's a big one too.
Yeah, thanks. No, the cost of doing business study, I'm a great believer in it and its usefulness to bike shops. As those who aren't familiar with it, it's a financial study of bike shops who report their numbers. It's kept confidential. And Industry Insights does a great job generating a report that shows all sorts of things within those financial statements that you can look at and use to analyze and create your business plan. I know within our industry, many bike shops are somewhat resistant to, I guess, what you call KPIs, key performance indicators, that the cost of doing business study really gives you. And understandable, you don't want to spend all your time focusing on numbers when you can be out inspiring your community to ride bicycles and all the rest of the more fun stuff. But I look on it as, like sometimes, usually when I ride my bicycle, I have a bike computer on, and it gives at minimum the key performance indicator of speed and of distance. Every now and then I'm sick of looking at those numbers though, and I take the computer off, leave it in the garage, and go on a bike free of all these numbers and all this complication, but I'm still loving my bike ride. But those numbers are still happening whether I'm looking at it or not. I'm still going a certain speed and a certain distance, and the numbers are happening without my permission, which is fine. So I think you don't have to, in my opinion, run your whole world based on the cost of doing business study averages. But I think there's real value in taking your own numbers and comparing them to industry norms to see what's possible or where you might be doing better than the average. And I find especially valuable to look at the high profit firm breakout, which is the top 25% based on profitability. Pull out those numbers and see how they compare to the average. And then, of course, if you have the report, your numbers compared to high profit, your numbers compared to average, and things will really pop out at you where you are high, where you are low. Personnel productivity is one that's my favorite. How many dollars does each employee generate? High profit firms, it's more per employee. How do they do that? Well, there's a whole, now this gets into the P2 kind of thing is, oh yeah, I want to move this number. How do I do it? I talk to my peers. I do more sales training. I have processes, whatever it is, to move that number. But you can tell by this report where you stand and how many employees you have per dollar and all of the rest of it to see if you're overstaffed, understaffed. Are you missing opportunities there? Heather, I think you mentioned inventory turns, that's a key one. And the high profit firms turn inventory a little better than the average. Margins, the high profit firms are a little better on margins overall, not a lot. It's not a huge difference sometimes, but you look at some of the margins in the report. Used bikes, 50% margins compared to new bikes, 32% margin. Well, that's a message right there. We hear used bikes are a good opportunity. Are they? Well, the report says yes. And there's enough dealers doing it that the answer can be yes. Parts and accessories at 45%. So what I've gotten from this report and past ones is that to look at the high profit versus the average, it's not a huge fundamental difference between them, but it's a lot of here and there little details. The high profit firms have a better turn rate, more revenue per square foot, a little better personnel productivity, a little better margins, and a little lower cost of doing business, which is the whole point. What is your expense structure versus your revenue as a percentage? And if you're cost of doing business, high profit firms, it's 33.6% in this report. The average, 41%, which means very simply, if you sell a bike for 34% margin, the high profit firm is making a little money on that, and the average store is not. And so I think this is all really interesting to me, and to see a 15.5% profit for a high profit firm, of the 20, 25, whatever are in this report, versus the 4% profit of the average, it tells a story. And you can dive into these numbers and really begin to see where the industry is, where you are in relation, high and low points, where you might be missing or exceeding averages. I know, NBDA has done a webinar on this, and Jay, you may have more to say on this. I think it's probably in the archives at the NBDA website if anyone wants to listen to it. But I find this report really interesting for anyone that interested in retail, but understanding, we had one past NBDA board member who was also a CPA, now a state senator, actually. He said, you take this report for what it is. It's honestly answered. These are good numbers in the broad picture, but they're not financially audited they're not audited, so you have to take it with a grain of salt. It's not necessarily exactly what you would aim for, but I find it incredibly value as finding and helping any retailer look at this report and compare their numbers to averages and to high profit and begin to be able to draw some conclusions based on data. So that's my summary.
Yeah, Fred, I know I'm with you. I think it's really, really insightful. I use the report. The report gets distributed throughout all of our P2 members. We hosted the webinar with Jay, and we're going to do a follow-up one in November to answer any questions that people had who purchased the report. So lots of information in there, and definitely gives us some indicators and a great guide for retailers to benchmark how they're doing against other retailers. All right, let's dive into the reporter. I got a couple articles that I just wanted to ask you guys about right off the bat. The article focusing on rider safety and how possibly we're going to have a vehicle to help address rider concern about safe places to ride. I think it's the #1 reason People for Bikes did a survey about youth cycling. Parents commented that they're afraid of where their kids can ride safely. We hear just ridership concerns about traveling on the roads. So this article is about the DOT calling for wireless vehicle tech on national highways and at most intersections by 2037. So they're looking for connected communications between vehicles, cyclists, pedestrians, and infrastructure. And we're hopeful that this is going to create safer intersections and vehicles, preventing crashes. Jay, thoughts on this? How could this shape our industry? This sounds great.
Well, I think it's going to be, as you say, huge from a safety standpoint for pedestrians and for bicyclists or folks using micromobility. Um, Mike and you both will recall going to the BLCs in the March timeframe early in the year when they would focus on e-bikes, but more importantly, from my standpoint in this article, V2X, the technology of communication between a bicyclist or a bicycle and an automobile was demonstrated. In fact, Mike, I think you actually rode in the test car. And you remember, Heather, it was just outside of the venue. So when there were coffee breaks, you could go out and ride in this car. They did that for several years. There was an initiative from Europe, from the European brands and manufacturers to try to get into the US market and really do something a year ago, which kind of fizzled out. But the fact is that V2X, or what you describe, and what DOT is now saying is going to move forward, and they're going to do what they can to mandate it, is common in Europe. European trucks, delivery vans, vehicles, depending on the country, have slightly different V2X, or vehicle to everything communication, to the roads, to the signs, to the semaphores, to the signals. What you've got is a driver gets communication from the road about what the road is. There's a signal coming up. There's a stop sign coming up. There's a traffic circle coming up, which we're becoming more common in the United States. But also there's a cyclist. There's a cyclist in the road. There's a cyclist around the corner where you can't see them. Fred, you'll appreciate this. There's a motorcyclist around the corner where you can't see them. It also says to the cyclist or the motorcyclist, there's a vehicle coming. There's a car that's coming. There's a car approaching at a high speed. Now, the part that Americans don't like at this point, that I think is going to have to be worked through, and DOT is going to have to figure out how to make this happen, is while the vehicle makers, for the most part, are doing the V2X in cars in Europe, easily transferable or done in the US. BMW is an example. All their SUVs are made here in South Carolina. So they're making all their European vehicles with V2X built in on the same assembly line in South Carolina, where they make a BMW off-road vehicle, or a SUV vehicle for the U.S. market. So they can easily just make the European version and the U.S. version. The expense is going to be in making sure that the whole of the road system is updated and wired. And the prototype for this over the last several years has been Denver. Denver, Colorado has this already built into the infrastructure, because this is where DOT has been experimenting with what's in Europe, which is wiring up to make sure that the road and the all the features of the road and all the signaling in the road can talk to the vehicle. From the standpoint of transportation or larger transportation and delivery vehicles, and also the 18-wheelers, this is extremely important, because the 18-wheelers, if you've been on the road with them, and I think we all have as cyclists, are a real danger. And so particularly when they're turning and the driver of a 18-wheeler cannot see the cyclist that's on their right-hand side out of view of their mirrors as their cab begins to turn, but yet that cyclist is vulnerable to that trailer and to those rear tandem wheels. This gives a signal. Now, I was about to say where the American drivers don't like this is in many of the European countries, their cars are set up so that the signal comes in that there's a cyclist, they're overtaking it, they're going too fast, there's a probability of contact, and the system automatically brakes the car, slows it to avoid a collision. Now, the American drivers don't like that. And we'll have to, DOT is going to have to work on that. But think about what people are seeing, and that is a great reduction in the fatality rates that have skyrocketed in this country among cyclists and pedestrians because of what DOT is moving forward. And couple it with some of the other initiatives that are moving forward, like lowering the height, the overall height of the hood height of an SUV, or more importantly, a pickup truck. in the market today because they've gotten much taller. Therefore, at the velocities they're able to go, when they do strike a pedestrian or cyclist, it goes from below the waist breakage to above the waist damage and head injury and death. So it's affecting the fatality rates. So with all that rambling, the point I see here is that yes, this will be very beneficial. It's going to save lives. And I think from our standpoint, it's going to eliminate a portion of the fear that some people have that's now making it very hard for them to get on the road or let their kids get on the road and ride bikes in this traffic environment. So I think it's going to be good overall for the industry. And the government's got to reconcile with the communities the cost of particularly wiring up the roadways. The vehicles, I don't think is going to be a huge issue because it's already done in Europe in a major market and in parts of Asia. But I do think the bigger expense is DOT figuring out with the states, many of which are strapped at this point for tax monies and in expenditures and dealing with school systems, et cetera, how they wire up the streets so that they can replicate what's already in place in Denver.
Yeah, there's lots there, and there is lots that has to happen with the backside of it, and the expense of getting just our infrastructure on the streets and roads set up. But wow, the wins that this could bring, fantastic, right?
Yeah.
If I could just jump in here quickly, as the cynic in the room, it makes me really nervous to give control to a computer, just like the problems with self-driving cars that don't see bicyclists. You're giving up now. So would I rather be hit by a drunk in a car or a computer that didn't see me? Well, I'd probably pick the drunk because there's someone to sue. So as long as this can be vetted and show that it actually works and improves safety, then, of course it's fine. But it's a very dynamic environment, as we know, out there on the highways. There's a lot of contingencies that it's hard to deal with for a human, especially one that's not paying attention. And the computers, it just makes me nervous that we have to be really careful before unleashing automatic controls on public roads.
We already have it to a certain degree. New cars with adaptive cruise controls. I mean, if I'm approaching an intersection and there's a stop car in front of me, two little cameras in my mirror housing see that car, and if I don't brake in time, it'll brake for me. When I'm backing into the garage, if my wife is walking in the door, it sees her and it announces there's a pedestrian behind you. Mm-hmm. So it's already here in a certain extent. This is an enhancement or an evolution of that same technology. And Jay, to your point about having to wire up the infrastructure, the demonstrations that I've participated in and the videos that I've shown at the various cabinet presentations don't require an infrastructure. They're standalone. Now, they're not, as Fred points out, they're not as smart as they would be were there local infrastructure to refine, the functionality of those systems. But, it's coming, and to a certain degree, it's here. And to Jay's point as well, cars that are being manufactured today have the functionality built into their chipset. It's just not turned on.
I appreciate Fred bringing us back to reality, though, making sure that we know, there is that other side of the coin. So I like that.
Well, just to Fred's point, I mean, early Teslas, when they were on autopilot, don't see white semi-trucks turning in front of you, and that's resulted in a lot of fatalities. So, much like the lithium-ion battery situation, it's a technology that it's in its early stages. It will be refined. It will be improved. It will be something that we can't. I mean, when I think about this, I think about cell phones. I mean, who knew that we'd have the kind of functionality in our cell phones that we have now? When these were first introduced, there was a bag phone. I had some status when I was with a company because I had a bag phone in my car. Nowadays, it's.
I remember the bag phone.
Yeah.
All right, let's move on. There's a really interesting article that I think I want to highlight because of the retailers on the call and the retailers we support. There could be something to learn here. So it's about Dick's Sporting Goods, and they have smashed earnings estimates. And this article is suggesting that they did this because they've expanded their field house concepts. So let's see, we've got a growth in transactions and average ticket price reported. And the company has a future expansion of its experimental house of sport formats that actually turn into this field house concept. And the Field House are smaller versions of a Dick's store that emphasize service, and they have features like rock climbing walls, indoor tracks, driving ranges. So they help them stand apart from traditional sporting goods stores. You can actually go in and go ahead and climb a rock wall, or you can try shoes out, or you can swing a golf club. So these experience stores are a smaller footprint than the traditional 50,000 square foot store, and they pack a bigger punch. And I mean, I think they have 17 of them open now and plan to open more. What should bicycle specialty retailers learn from this?
Well, I'll start it out by saying it's experiential. Right now, we do this without an indoor environment. We do it with a test ride.
Mm-hmm.
So
Yep.
I think it's there. A lot of dealers will tell you, and I did for years espouse this as well, is there's nothing like a test ride. Nothing replaces that test ride as a closer. For dealers, I do think though it does go to more experiential, more things that a consumer can experience in the inside environment, particularly in the climate control areas, as we used to call them, where it snows, it gets cold, and that is put the bike on a trainer.
Mm-hmm.
So that an individual can experience it, particularly with an e-bike, where you can demonstrate an e-bike in a trainer environment, and they can experience the throttle if it's got a throttle. They can experience the built-in systems, the torque sensing systems, so that they can experience how you can change the riding pace and so on. And I think that goes for the accessory side too, is develop experiential displays. Many dealers, and in my memory, looking at store layouts, used to do this, where they would set up handlebar displays, and it was emulating in a store a cockpit or a variety of cockpits where a consumer could try the various accessories that mounted on the handlebar. So I think the lesson I take away from what the Dick's format is exactly that: is more experiential, more incorporating of the test ride, more incorporating the experience of getting on the product and trying it, or trying out the accessory product with hands-on. That ties to what's happening with D2C, where the big change we're seeing is the consumer shopping online, but coming to the retail store to experience the product and wanting to talk to an expert. And then, the whole transition and conversion of tell your store staff to expect some of the consumers to come in with a preconceived set of research knowledge that may not be right, but go along with it. Be nice to them, because they spend a lot of time working this to the point where they're now in looking at your product in your store. So, be kind to them and be very mindful that you've got to absorb their knowledge and then try to make sure you're correcting what's wrong. But the whole point is the consumer's coming into the retail store for an experiential experience, for a hand-on experience.
Yeah. Fred, do you have any thoughts on this one too? Just to get your
just a few. I love this concept and the way Jay put it forward. The importance of the test ride. And so my mind's still on the cost of doing business. Every square foot in your store you're paid for, but the whole world is your showroom on a bicycle. When you're on a test ride, you've got everywhere you can go, and it's all free. You don't have to pay for the rent on the world. And so, talk about experiential. Riding a bike has certain advantages over some of the other sports. Indoor climbing wall, fine, but you can't very well take them to the Tetons and actually do a rock climb, but you can on a bicycle typically leave right from the store and go riding around a bit. I just one observation.
Yeah, no, I like it. Let's see. There's an article, the Pros Closet closing. By the time we're recording here, they're already in the process of the close down. It started out in a VW bus, evolved into an eBay store, and then became this used bike and component e-com giant. After 18 years, it's surprising to me, because we talk about the strength in the used bike market. What are your thoughts here? I'm interested to hear.
Well, I for one had opined when I did the article, this surprised the heck out of me. Just simply because in most cases, when we see a firm like that, 18, 20 years in the business, it's grown to the size and the reputation they have, it sputters. You get indications that, and they did have layoffs. I mean, that was reported in the press, but then it was, no more news about their financial problems, which obviously were severe because they'd taken in a big tranche of investment money. And so they had other people involved when they went the move to the new warehouse, and they were growing and they were becoming more international in scope, and they were emulated. There's people still in existence doing the circular economy and the pre-owned product business, both in e-bike and regular acoustic bikes, that saw the success of a Pro's Closet and jumped on it. They also saw what Fred mentioned in the cost of doing business reports, and used bikes in the market are the highest margin that a retailer or any retailer achieves in this business on a global basis. It's 50% plus in some cases, or it could be less, but I mean, you're talking 50% is the median that's being reported, the average. So Pro's Closet, I thought, was doing a good job. I remember them in the beginning and talked to the owners, the original founders, frequently. And it just surprised me in our economy. But then in retrospect, you've got many companies today that, Tupperware surprised the dickens out of me, although they've been saved out of bankruptcy. Still, a company like Tupperware that was a mainstay, names like that, names in the clothing business, uh, the department store business that were icons. Even Nike is showing cracks in the veneer, and now the new president is supposed to turn it around, but they've had profit loss that they've never seen before. So I guess in retrospect, looking at what's occurred during the COVID, post COVID, and what the disruptions are in this economy to the supply chain and to the individual ecosystems that are out there, I guess I shouldn't have been surprised, but I was. I mean, it came as probably a rude awakening to me, that in what should I thought would be a very profitable seam, and probably still is, there were problems there, obviously, that they didn't report, and I don't think we have any way of seeing. I don't think we're going to hear about them.
Yeah. Yeah, unfortunately, I mean, I remember them as being a very strong force in the industry for some time.
Could I jump in just briefly? I think I don't want to read too much into it, but it's just possible that used bicycles are better at the local level. And because of all the private party sales that occur, how many bike shops we have, and the good margins that make it a good deal for the bike shop to do used bikes, it's possible that a national retailer is kind of just fundamentally the system itself doesn't match up with where consumers are buying and the kind of used bikes they want to get. So that maybe it was just Pro's Closet, I don't know, but maybe not. I think all on this call are a great believer that some things are just best handled locally. Amazon, packaged goods, whatever, buy something cheap, that's fine, and more than that, of course. But it's possible that used is more a local focused product segment.
I like that.
Couldn't agree more. Yeah. And I think the other thing, Fred, is investment. I said they took a tranche of, I think, millions, 14, 15, 20 million somewhere. We'd have to go back and research it. But there's another article in this month's newsletter on GoCycle, where the owner of GoCycle in England, and you may have it on the list that we're going to discuss, Heather, and not to take from that, but simply the fact that here's a case where the founder owner is pointing out that the investment capital people are scared. They went into our business and then got scared off by what's happened since 2002 relative to inventory profits, the discounting. And so the investment capital is not available at this point in time, which goes to your point, Fred, that investment capital investment people, private equity people may have looked at what was occurring with the Pro's Closet on a balance sheet from 2020 that are not happy with what they see on the balance sheet in 2024. And that's happening across the board in a lot of companies and a lot of industries right now. So I think you raise a good point.
Let's see, there's lots here. I want to keep moving forward. An hour always goes by so quickly with you guys because we can get into so much. There's an article about 16,000 fat bikes seized in the Netherlands, not street legal, so they go faster than 25 kilometers an hour. Then we also have the article about a California bill that redefines Class 1 and Class 3 electric, so SB 1271, which was signed into law. What do we need to know about what's happening out there around Class 1, 2, 3, and and how the industry is reacting?
Well, let's take Europe first, and then I think Mike and Fred can pitch in on what's happening in the California situation at the state legislative issue. But the Netherlands case, where they impounded smaller quantities before, by the way, 16,000 was quite dramatic.
Yeah.
These are what we look at in the United States as the fat tire products, the moped-like fat tire bikes, the 3.5, 4-inch tires, 20-inch in diameter. And yeah, they go in excess. Now, remember, most European speed limits are 15.5 miles an hour, not 20. And so you start with the fact that they've got a little stricter set of regulations that we have to begin with in this country. Ours is 750 watts. Theirs is 250. Speed limit here 20 by CPSC, and but driven by that motor alone. And then in Europe, it's the equivalent of 15.5 miles an hour. But we've got a style of product in the United States which we could discuss, but kids are riding them. It's a different kind of a market than we ever had before the COVID. It's not the traditional bike market that we've seen. In fact, there are some experts that have opined recently that the kids' e-bike market is totally different than the regular bike market. And you okay, Fred?
Just a little scratch in my throat.
Me too, earlier on, I understand. So I think what I take out of Europe, the walk away from that is that the Europeans are going to be quicker to restrict, quicker to make sure that kids going too fast on moped-like products are going to be clamped down on, and they are not going to be, if you will, bullied by the market. Their laws are not going to be bullied by the market. Then you segue to the United States, and I look at that right now as what's happening in the California piece as the beginnings of mass confusion. And the fact that we've got a basic federal reg that's being ignored totally.
Yeah.
And not being adhered to. And I don't, Mike, if you got any comments to that, or Fred?
Yeah, Jay, we've harped on this for a long time. The European standard 15194 does not equate to 2849 or the CPSC 1512 standard. And with respect to e-bike electrical systems as one segment of the regulation, it's generally speaking significantly different, because the European regulation, as you point out, has got different performance attributes associated with the product that it regulates. The European bikes are constrained to 250 watts rated power and 15.5 miles an hour. American bikes are commonly take advantage of the fact that the CPSC regulations are much more liberal in terms of performance, 750 watts and 20 miles an hour. And how do you reconcile that? And basically, to say that a European regulation applies to an American style bike, European regulations preclude throttles. It has to be a pedal assist bike. It cannot be a throttle powered bike. So how do you reconcile that? I mean, there's a number of brands that sell throttle only product. They don't have torque sensors, or they don't have torque sensors only, or if they do, it's only a portion of their product line. So it appears as though the motive behind that is to make it easy for the OEs to meet the regulations, in spite of the fact that the regulation doesn't really pertain to the product that they're selling. And then there's the whole issue associated with the certification of the testing agency. we advocate for an NRTL, a nationally recognized testing lab, because as you point out in the article, a nationally recognized testing laboratory requires follow-up inspections at the point of origin for the product to make sure that nothing changes in the specification that would in effect take it out of compliance. But because nobody's looking at the cert anymore, they're going to get away with it. Well, with an NRTL, that doesn't happen because there's follow-up inspections to say, wait a minute, this is what passed and that's not what you're selling. So there can be all sorts of ramifications associated with that. So I just think it's irresponsible on the part of our industry to endorse a scenario whereby we have multiple standards, multiple non-equal or non-compatible standards, and various testing requirements associated with the test lab certification to make it easy in one segment of the marketplace, because it's going to set up confusion and I think the possibility for liability issues down the road. I mean, if somebody gets hurt on a bike, I'm an expert witness. I testify a lot. And if I'm sitting on the stand and saying, well, does your product comply with applicable regulations? And I have to say, yeah, we comply with 15194. And he's going to say, well, is that the most stringent regulation around here? And oh, by the way, are there more regulations that may have addressed the scenario that resulted in the injury for my client? I'll truthfully have to say no. And, it's basically an invitation for a plaintiff's attorney to demand a blank check from the vendor. So it just seems to me that we're being a little bit irresponsible, a little bit reckless in this regard. And we need to pull together as an industry to insist upon the most stringent requirements and the most stringent testing certifications. And we're not doing that. And I think that's irresponsible.
Mike, I couldn't agree more.
If I could just once again dive in, the rebel in me says, just let the kids do what they want. It'll all evolve. But the concerned citizen in me says, we're really dropping the ball on this, both, and it's not just the industry, it is the industry, to Mike's point, but it's local law enforcement, it's the government itself. And so I think I'm down on the side of more enforcement of the laws. It's always been a mystery to me why class 3 28-mile-an-hour e-bikes are in these regulations. In my opinion, they shouldn't be. But the industry has, allowed it, and the government, that's class 3, 28 miles an hour. Well, even comparing to the CPSC current definition, that's not a bicycle. So it's the Wild West. Things are evolving here, and I would be in favor, personally, of a little more regulation for sure.
It'll be interesting to see what happens after next Tuesday.
Yeah, we are taping October 31st. So coming on the beginning of November, we all know what happens the beginning of November. Let's go ahead and end this episode. We've been talking for an hour here. I had a bunch more questions, but it always goes by so quickly. Specific advice for our listeners. Fred, popping it to you for retailers.
Yeah, so Steve Bean is not on this call, but he did write an article in this Micromobility Reporter called Winter is Coming, and just urging people to take advantage of the end of the busiest time of the year to examine your operations and to make a good plan. And I think, back to the earlier conversation on cost of doing business study, I think part of that should be using some key performance indicators and setting a couple of goals on some numbers that you can measure, that you can improve next year, build that into your plan. It's not pie in the sky. If you're, make sure that if it's going to be a financial investment to pursue this, that there's a good projectable return on that investment. It's that, don't just do it willy-nilly. But so I think Steve's article, I resonated with me that this is the time to begin really thinking about 2025. And I think after next Tuesday, some of the parameters of that planning may be different, than what they are now. So.
Excellent. I love that. Thank you, Fred, for that. Jay, what about for our suppliers listening to the podcast today? What advice do you have for them?
Well, and after, almost 12 months and more than that, we've been doing this for a couple of years, basically saying to the suppliers, be honest. I think I'm going to be blunter at this point. Suppliers have to begin to tell the truth. because it's becoming clear, as I said at the beginning of this podcast, that the facts and the information that are out there, whether it's purposeful or not, most of it's innocent, but it's disinformation. And some of the brands encourage it. Some of the brands are actually advancing disinformation because they don't want the rank and file or the dealers or the people in the industry or the consumers to know the truth. But the old system, the old way we did business, the old supply chain, the old things that we considered to be the truths that we operated under are shattered. They're gone. They're finished. And we've got to focus on new business plans. And those business plans, I think, from a supplier standpoint, have to carefully examine whether they want to work with specialty bicycle retailers or not. And to be very careful about that because of the fact, as we pointed out, and anybody that's ever been around the business knows, is the retailer has the intimate contact with the consumer. And in fact, if the retailers will stop and think about it, they are the brand. And so the bike brands themselves certainly have to make their own decisions, go their own direction, make sure they're putting their effort and their time into their profitability. But I don't think they no longer can have duality. They can't speak out of both sides of their mouth about who they're going to partner with and who they're going to make profit for. They've got to concentrate on their profitability. If they want to do that, let the dealers go. Let the dealers focus on their profitability, their success in the market, and how dealers can best serve the consuming public. And I think they do a better job of it in the long pull. But I think the end result here is that dealers are going to have to develop their own business plans independent of as I said early on at the beginning, of bike brands. And they're going to have to come up with a new business model for themselves that focuses on what they do best. And then the bike brands are going to have to figure out how to work with them.
Excellent. I like that. I guess, Mike, let's bring it over to you. Focus when it comes to e-mobility and safety.
Heather, I did not launch my engineering career 52 years ago anticipating that I was going to be the Paul Revere of the industry, riding up the streets, ringing the bell, saying the batteries are coming, the batteries are coming. I've been sort of hoping that this whole thing would settle down and I could go into other things, but clearly it's still an issue. Clearly people are dying and the possibility hasn't gone away. So I guess I'll continue on my soapbox. We're at the cusp of the trade show seasons. CABD is coming up. NBDA supplier summits are coming up. Clearly, I'll continue to preach the importance of awareness of the awareness of the potential dangers associated with this incredibly wonderful power supply that we utilize in our products. Because on balance, it is a wonderful thing. It's the gasoline of micromobility, and gasoline is much more energy dense than lithium-ion batteries, but improperly used or it represents a significant danger, and we just have to elevate awareness. And I'd hope that our efforts had penetrated further than apparently they have, but we'll continue harping on this because it is dangerous if it's not taken care of. So.
I agree with you. I couldn't agree more. Gentlemen, thank you so much. It's such a wealth of information. I mean, I'm sure we could go on and talk the micromobility. If you haven't subscribed, listeners, please head over humanpoweredsolutions.com. You can sign up for the free report there. Read it in detail. Read Steve Bina's article from this past month. There's also a bunch of white papers and blogs on there. Gentlemen, thank you so much.
You're welcome.
Thank you.
All right. Bye now.
Bye.
Thank you for tuning into Bicycle Retail Radio, presented by the National Bicycle Dealers Association. We hope you enjoyed today's episode, and if you did, please like, subscribe, or leave us a review. Sharing this podcast with your friends helps us reach more listeners and continue to bring you the best content. Remember, we host 2 shows per week with ever-changing guests and fresh content to keep you both informed and inspired. The National Bicycle Dealer Association is committed to providing valuable events, webinars, and opportunities for industry education and connection. Stay up to date by visiting nbda.com to see our event calendar. Special thanks to Francis Abbott for the promotional graphics for today's episode. If you're interested in advertising on Bicycle Retail Radio or have a guest suggestion, Visit NBDA.com to learn more. Thanks again for listening, and we'll see you next time on Bicycle Retail Radio.